The very unsavory story of Jerry Sandusky has been back in the news this week, though Sandusky himself has already been tried, found guilty, and put in prison. The news this week is about the investigation that is trying to answer the question, how on earth could such a high-profile character have continued to rape little boys who were in his care, both in his home and at Penn State, when family members and university employees knew what was going on? The Freeh report that was released this week described what they call a striking lack of empathy on the part of university officials. And the Penn State newspaper asked the question, where were all the heroes? As horribly sad and morally repugnant as it is to have to think about child rape, we do know that it goes on, and we largely accept that the perpetrators are mentally ill. What everyone around the university community is now trying to wrestle with is the fact that people all the way from janitors to the head coach, Joe Paterno, and possibly the wife and children of Sandusky himself knew what was going on and did nothing to stop it. How do people who are not criminals, who are not themselves mentally ill, manage to turn the other way and avoid getting involved when something is so absolutely unspeakable going on in their presence? Especially when our population, generally speaking, loves to talk about sex. We love it. We'll skewer a politician for having an extramarital affair. The media loves to find some gay-bashing preacher or politician in a men's room having a same-sex encounter. And those of us who live here in small-town Midwest know all too well that you can meet someone for a cup of coffee, and the next day it is generally known that you're having an affair with that person. People love salacious gossip, and they love it so much that if they can't find any, they'll exaggerate something completely out of proportion or make something up whole cloth. But you see, this Sandusky thing, this is not just idle gossip. Whoever reported Sandusky was going to encounter personal loss. Whoever blew the whistle on him was going to lose status rather than gain status. People gossip to gain status, to feel superior to other people, to act like they know something that someone else doesn't know, to gain attention. But when you report something real, like what Sandusky was doing, the person who blows the whistle will suffer in the process. His victims had, from time to time, reported the abuse, but even the police that took the reports didn't want to take it seriously. No one could believe that Sandusky would really be guilty of those kinds of crimes. The football program at Penn State is like a regional religion, and Sandusky was at least one of the apostles. In fact, the person who finally forced the issue was not one of his victims. It was, in fact, a 22-year-old journalism graduate who had just graduated from Penn State and was working for the local paper in that small town. She was the one that heard the rumors, investigated, interviewed people, and for a year took a beating professionally because she was pursuing the case until it finally gained enough public attention that a genuine investigation was done and charges were filed. Were it not for Sarah Ganim, I'm not sure that Sandusky wouldn't still be recruiting new victims. She took the heat from it, but she made it happen. Hooray for courageous journalism. Too bad that it took a 22-year-old woman who was being paid next to nothing to find the courage to do it when people all around Sandusky, some of whom were making multi-million-dollar salaries, failed to be responsible. In our gospel lesson today, we see another situation that really cried out for a hero. Most of us are very familiar with the story of how Herod felt trapped into beheading John the Baptist, though most of us think we know things that we don't know. Neither Matthew nor Mark actually name the daughter in question. Josephus said that Herodias had a daughter who was named Salome, and so we believe the stories that it was Salome. And then there has been this tradition of Salome dancing a very lusty dance that we even named the Dance of the Seven Veils. None of that is in the biblical witness, and none of that is in Josephus. It actually originated with none other than the great biblical scholar Oscar Wilde, who wrote a play about it. And he's the one who put the name to it and described it as a lusty dance. Again, we're likely to attribute incestuous motives to Herod because we like to tell those kinds of stories. We like salacious gossip, but that was not Mark's story. Mark tells us simply that Herod's daughter or stepdaughter, depending upon how you translate it, danced at his birthday party, and he was so proud of her that he offered to give her anything she asked for, up to and including half of his kingdom. Because her mother hated John the Baptist, she influenced her daughter to ask for John's head on a platter. But the line that this narrative turns on is verse 26. I invite you to take a look at it. And this is the description of everyone who knew what Sandusky was doing and said nothing. This is the description of every Catholic bishop who just moved pedophile priests around from one parish to another. Every business that decides to settle out of court with victims to hide the offenses of their executives. It says, "The king was deeply grieved, yet out of regard for his oaths and his guests, he did not want to refuse her." He didn't want to be embarrassed. And the least embarrassing thing he could do was to murder John the Baptist. The request was that we have an innocent man murdered, and he did it because he didn't want people to think less of him. People will lie and gossip and tear another person's life apart for the titillating entertainment of talking about someone else's real or imagined foibles. But when it comes down to putting your own flesh into the matter, then people have an amazing capacity for looking the other way. We ignore horrible evil in order to not be excluded, to not be derided ourselves. Whistleblowers never become famous for whistleblowing. Can you name the names of the people who were the whistleblowers in the Enron case? They saved a huge amount of our economy that was just being boiled down into horrible practices in power trading. And yet those women have had difficulty getting another job or in even supporting themselves because whistleblowers tend to become so unpopular that no one else ever wants to employ them. No one ever wants to trust them. It has been my great honor to meet Elie Wiesel on 2 occasions. Once here at MSU, back when it was SMSU, and the second time when I was a fellow at Harvard. I really hate it when people compare everything in the world to the Holocaust because there's not very many things in the world that deserve to be compared to the Holocaust. I think we should be very careful about use of references to Nazis or the Holocaust. But Wiesel has written and spoken about the kind of moral test that was put to him and to so many of his Jewish countrymen by the extremity of the Holocaust. And he was just 15 years old when he was first put into a death camp. He has made it very clear that it was not only the German Nazis who are to be remembered as being responsible for this horror, but also everyone else who knew about it and did nothing to stop it. Ships filled with Jewish refugees tried to come to the United States, and we would not let them come into port. We sent them back to Europe. At one point, the American Coast Guard was deployed along the coast of the Carolinas and Florida to keep ships from pulling up into those warmer waters and having Jews jump over and swim to land. They forced them back onto the ships rather than allow them to set foot and ask for asylum in America. We did not start, we did not perpetrate the Holocaust, but folks, we were partners. We helped because we stood idly by and refused to be drawn in. When Wiesel first wrote his short book of memories from the Holocaust, Night, no one would publish it. We knew what had happened, but no one would publish it for 2 decades after the war, when we knew what the facts were, but still the world didn't want to acknowledge that we had stood idly by. Once Night was published, and when Wiesel won the Nobel Prize for it, in his acceptance speech he said that all of the ethics of the Christian and Jewish Bibles could be distilled into one sentence. And you should know what that sentence is, because it's on our banner. Thou shalt not stand idly by. When we started this church and we were meeting in a windowless rented hall, we commissioned these 2 worship banners to be made to look like stained glass windows to represent the core values of our church. The one that is the multicolored hands joining together in community expresses beautifully and in a wonderful way our vision of what our church was to be. Persons of different races, sexual orientations, genders, ages, classes would come together without judgment to form a faith community. And probably any other church would say that that's true of them, whether it is or not. They would want to be able to claim that. But this other image is of a winged lion. The image is born in Daniel, but it's most often used as the symbol to represent the Gospel of Mark. We ask the artist to make the lion look powerful, with a look of determination on his face. One paw is raised to let you know that he's not asleep and he might be dangerous. The winged lion in this sort of image represents Mark traditionally, but rather than make it so narrow, we had her put on that book this quote from Wiesel that we think distills not only the Old and New Testament ethics, but most of the ethics of most other world religions, that thou shalt not stand idly by. We cannot be a community that just watches injustice. I got to speak briefly with Wiesel when he was in Springfield in 1998, and I asked him why he was so certain that another Holocaust would never happen. And he told me that people had learned from what happened to the Jews, and that the world was no longer capable of that kind of indifference, that it would never happen again. I also got to see him at Harvard in 2004, after we had trumped up a case for invading Iraq. And I reminded him of what he had said to me in Springfield, and I asked him if he still felt the same way. And he looked at the floor and he shook his head no. Various types of ethnic, ideological, or just plain old economic cleansings of people have taken place within and between nations. We have learned lessons from the Holocaust. We've learned from the story of Rwanda. We have both done too much and too little at times to navigate the complex circumstances of people striving to gain freedom from despotic leaders. You would have thought, after what our nation experienced in Vietnam, that we would have never made the mistakes that we seem to have gleefully made in our current oil wars. But the lessons that we learned during Vietnam have to be relearned and learned again and learned again. A part of standing idly by is what some people call compassion fatigue. We cannot fight every fight. We know that there is racial discrimination in our justice system. We know that payday lenders in this state are charging up to 2,000% interest on small loans. We know that many of the people executed by states around the country were not actually guilty of the crimes with which they were charged. We know that lethal weapons are being sold along the American border with Mexico, and that tens of thousands, upwards of 60,000 Mexicans have been killed with weapons bought at Walmart stores in Texas, Arizona, and New Mexico. And I could go on and on with this list, but we can't get involved with everything. No one has the energy to take on the world. But somewhere between standing idly by and martyring ourselves this afternoon, there is a conscionable place to take a stand. In September, when the MS-150 rolls around, I may participate. And even at my advanced age, and I'll be 56 when that takes place, I can ride 150 miles in 2 days on a bicycle. But only if I ride 20 and 30 miles and 40 and 50 miles all summer long. If my bicycle stays in my office until the second week of September and I jump on it and try to ride 150 miles, EMS will write a report. Compassion is very much the same way. You have to practice. You have to exercise. You have to, as Mother Teresa said, have great love in small things. And you have to do those small things over and over and over again. When we take lunch to what is now nearly 100 people every time we go to Bill's place, we're not solving the problem of hunger among the homeless of Springfield, but we're practicing. Every week we're practicing. We're learning something else. And I think that it becomes very difficult to take lunch to homeless people at Bill's place and then encounter someone in your personal life who is in great need and choose not to respond. We say we can't do everything. We talk about compassion fatigue, but the truth is we have to try. We have to exercise. We have to do a little more than we did last time until we become really good at it. Even Mother Teresa didn't become Mother Teresa all at once. Gandhi didn't become Gandhi all at once. Martin Luther King didn't plan to go to the meeting to discuss a bus boycott. He had to be drugged into action. But by practice, by repeated action, we can become the heroes who were absent when Herod had a birthday party and when Jerry Sandusky was molesting little boys at Penn State. Several years ago, Sheryl Crow put a line in one of her songs, the song Love is a Good Thing, great song. And one of the lines said, "Watch our children while they kill each other with a gun they bought at Walmart discount store." And this caused no small discomfort to Walmart executives because, in fact, they do sell guns in all of their stores in America right next to the toy department. So they had a meeting down in Bentonville to discuss this phenomenally stupid practice in their corporation. And the executives of Walmart made a bold decision. They decided that they would not sell that CD by Sheryl Crow. As Lily Tomlin once said, no matter how cynical I become, I just can't keep up. Folks, what I heard Elie Wiesel say is this: take sides, because neutrality always serves the oppressor and never the oppressed. Your silence will always be interpreted as consent. There is no honor in remaining neutral in matters of ethical importance. Always taking the middle ground doesn't make you smart, it doesn't make you fair, it doesn't make you balanced, and it certainly doesn't make you innocent, because your silence will always be interpreted as consent by the oppressor. When I'm dead and gone, I don't know how much of what I've said you all will remember, but I want to give you just a couple of proverbs that I want you to hold on to. The yellow line in the middle of the road is for dead armadillos and cowards, and only dead fish always swim with the stream. We've got to be willing to break out of our neutrality and take sides in matters of injustice. The Reverend Alan Bosak of South Africa said during the battle against apartheid that we will go before God to be judged, and God will ask us, "Where are your wounds?" And we will answer, "We have no wounds." And God will ask us, "Did you find nothing worth fighting for?" I don't want to pick your battles for you, but I do want to assure you that there is more to life than just showing up at your funeral as a good-looking corpse. Be sure that you go to that day with some very meaningful wounds.
Amen.
You've been watching a progressive Christian video from the Community Christian Church of Springfield, Missouri. We encourage our viewers to donate to our efforts in feeding the homeless and hungry of our community. Write to us at reverend.ray@aol.com for more information.